Everybody be seated, please. You may continue, Ms. Boss.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Magbanua, where were you born?
In the Philippines.
When did you move to the United States?
I was around 7, probably 6, 7 years old.
So do you still have family in the Philippines?
Yes, ma'am.
So if you needed to flee the country, you'd have somewhere to go, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, when that warrant was released for you, but not executed because you weren't arrested, they laid out in there that your phone had been tapped, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you go and change your phone number?
No.
Did you continue using that phone?
Yes, ma'am.
When was the last time you saw that phone?
When was the last time I saw that phone or
The phone.
phone number?
Well, phone number, because you haven't changed the number, right?
At that time, I don't believe so.
Did you have that phone on you when you were arrested?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's the last time you saw that phone?
Yes, ma'am.
The police have it in their custody.
Yes, ma'am.
You also, after Sigfredo was arrested, you went and got a burner phone.
Yes, ma'am.
What's a burner phone?
Well, I just kind of learned about it right now, but having another, like a phone where you can just throw away.
Is it prepaid?
Yes.
So it's not really directly linked to you in any way?
Yes.
All right. Why did you do that?
Well, when Sigfredo got arrested,
Mm-hmm.
right after that, I believe, yeah, that's when he got one for himself and he got one for me.
So who bought you that phone?
Sigfredo.
But you continued using your phone.
Yes.
Were you out of custody when a special by 2020 with ABC was released?
Yes, I was still out.
You were still out, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So you were able to watch it.
Yes, I saw it.
And it was very clear that they considered you to be involved in this, right?
Well, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let's talk about the day that you were arrested. October 1st, 2016. That was 3 years ago, almost to the date.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you remember that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Very clearly?
Clear as day.
Okay. Where did you go that morning?
Well, that morning, my daughter actually had a ballet recital. So,
Ask another question. Just a second.
Were you with your kids that morning?
yes, ma'am.
Were
Well,
you
with
driving?
my daughter.
Okay.
Thank
you
God.
drive-
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, and I'm interrupting you. Go ahead.
Thank God that my son wanted to stay with my mom.
Were you driving the Lexus that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Where did you get pulled over by the Broward Sheriff's Office?
I was in a shopping plaza.
Did you still have the kids, or had you dropped them off?
My daughter, it was actually a shopping plaza next to Sigfredo's sister's apartment.
Mm-hmm.
I grabbed some food for all of them, so I dropped it off with my daughter, and my daughter wanted to stay there and so she could play with her cousins.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to do some errands, so I went to that plaza to go look for clothes for them.
How did you know that the police wanted to interact with you?
How did I know?
Describe your arrest, how you got pulled over.
There was actually, I was leaving the plaza already, and there was a little bit of congestion in the, like, one part where everybody's exits, and I was actually looking around like, oh my God, something's happening or whatever, but then I had guns drawn in front of me, and like, I didn't even park the car because I was just like, I didn't know if it was for me or somebody around me,
Mm-hmm.
so I put my hands up because at that time too, there was a lot of things going on in the news about people getting shot.
Okay. You didn't have a firearm on you?
No, ma'am.
You do own a firearm, or did back then, right?
Yes, I did.
And you're not a convicted felon,
No, ma'am.
so you're allowed to own a firearm.
Yes, ma'am.
But it wasn't in the car.
No, ma'am.
So, put your hands up. How many guns were pointed at you?
I can't even count. It was just in every direction.
Okay. Did you know that they had been following you?
No, ma'am.
And had they been following you, they would have seen that you just dropped off your kids.
Yes, ma'am.
What happened to you in the car when you saw all those guns?
Well, the car was kind of still going because, like I freaked out and I kind of let go of like the gas and, the brake, and then I put it on park. They told me like, put it on park, and then I was like, okay, hold on. And then I put it on park. They got me out, and then I believe it was Isom that like ran up to me and was just like, are you being arrested?
Okay. Now, I know you recognize Isom now.
Yeah, I
You've
recognize
seen him
now.
several times. Was Agent Sanford there? You remember him testifying?
I believe so. He was
Okay.
there too.
And you were immediately taken into custody.
Yes, ma'am.
Did they identify themselves as being with the Tallahassee Police Department?
Yes, they did.
Okay. And you were then taken to what jail?
I was taken to Broward.
Okay. Since the date of your arrest, you know what the state's theory is, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Describe for me any random day for you in the past 3 years. What happens when you wake up in the morning?
Objection, relevance.
Ask your question again. Don't answer the question till I rule. Ask your question again.
Describe a day of being in custody to the jury.
I sustain the objection.
You've been in custody this entire time, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware that the government wants Charlie Adelson?
Objection, relevance.
Sustain.
Were you aware that the government has said that you have the key to your own freedom?
Objection, Judge, your prior ruling.
Don't answer the question. Ask your question. Don't answer,
I'm
please.
gonna ask for a sidebar for
Okay.
for this question.
All right.
There are televisions in jail, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you were privy to several news reports on this case, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You were aware that the government's position was that you saw a news report where they said that you hold the key to your own freedom. Remember
Yes, ma'am.
that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What did that mean to you?
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
That it's up to me to get out of jail
Okay, and how would you do that?
if I gave up Charlie.
Do you have information that Charlie Adelson was involved in this?
Do I have information? I mean, based on everything that we've been seeing, but I don't have personal information.
Based on everything you've seen, do you think Charlie was involved in this?
Yes,
Do you think Charlie was lying to you?
yes.
And the last time you saw your kids was when?
That's not relevant. Anything further, Ms. Claus?
Are you innocent?
Yes.
No further questions at this time.
Garcia?
Good afternoon, Ms. Magbanua.
Good afternoon.
You talked about an incident where my client pulled out behind a vehicle that Charlie Adelson was driving, leaving was it a house or an apartment?
Yeah, an apartment.
Do you recall what day that was?
Yeah.
Does July 1st,
Yes.
2014 sound about right?
Yes, sir.
And you've been sitting in this trial the whole time, correct?
Yes, sir.
Right over there by Ms. Colas and Mr. DeCoste, correct?
Yes, sir.
You also heard the government indicate that on a day that my client, Sigfredo Garcia, called Harvey Adelson. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was on the same day, July 1st, 2014, correct?
I'm not quite sure, but I think it is.
So if it was that day, that would coincide on the same day that my client pulled out and try to stop Charlie Adelson from leaving the home that you're at with you, correct?
Yes.
And you described my client as being upset during this interaction, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, you sat here and you heard Luis Rivera testify too, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you know who Luis Rivera is, right?
Yes, sir.
And he indicated that there was a time where he was in the car with my client. They drove up to a restaurant in Brickell. You remember that?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Rivera testified to that in this trial.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Rivera testified that my client saw you and Charlie Adelson having lunch, right?
Yeah, yes, sir. I
And-
believe like an early dinner.
You were at a restaurant eating, correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Rivera testified that my client indicated that he wanted to run over Mr. Adelson, correct? You recall him?
Rivera testified that, yeah, you're
That my client wanted to run over Charlie Adelson,
Yes,
correct?
sir.
Now, that was before the July 1st incident, correct?
Yes, sir.
Would you agree with me that those two instances are an accurate reflection of my client's feelings on Charlie Adelson?
Yes, sir.
Didn't
At all.
like the fact that you were in a relationship with him,
Yes,
correct?
sir. Yes.
You'll agree with me that Mr. Adelson knew who my client was, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's evidenced by the fact that there's been a text message correspondence that your own attorneys have shown where you ask Mr. Adelson if my client has called him, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you did this because you were concerned about my client maybe hurting Charlie Adelson,
Yes, sir.
or I guess at the minimum cussing him out or saying certain ugly things to him. Would that be fair?
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Adelson in the text message says something about he wants to take me deep sea fishing, correct?
Yes, sir.
That doesn't mean that they were going to go on a friendly fishing trip together, right?
No.
Did Mr. Adelson ever do illicit drugs in front of you?
Did Mr. Adelson?
Correct.
Yes.
Were you aware if, let me phrase it this way. Did you know if Charlie Adelson took steroids?
I wasn't aware, but
Did you have any suspicions?
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that Charlie Edison wasn't a drug dealer, right? He wasn't a drug dealer.
No.
He was a dentist,
Yes.
but he was able to obtain drugs, right?
Yes.
Now, Luis Rivera was a drug dealer, correct?
Yes.
You knew this.
Yes.
He even testified to it in open court that he sold drugs.
Yes.
Were you friendly with Jessica Rodriguez when Luis Rivera got indicted?
When he got, yes.
And were you friendly with Jessica Rodriguez during the time that you knew Charlie Adelson?
Yes.
And you would mention, I think you mentioned to Jessica Rodriguez about you meeting Charlie, right?
Yeah. Like I mentioned his name to her.
You heard Luis Rivera describe himself in court as a jack boy, correct?
Yes.
And that means that he's someone that robs people, correct?
Yes.
Robs people at gunpoint, presumably,
Yes.
correct? Now, you knew that Luis Rivera owned a firearm, correct?
Yes.
And you also knew that he was a member of the Latin Kings.
Yes.
You also knew he was a high-ranking official of the Latin Kings.
Yes.
That's something he was very proud of, correct?
Yes.
He even has a huge tattoo of his gang membership on his stomach, correct?
Yes.
It's not a fake tattoo, it's a permanent tattoo, correct?
Yeah, it's permanent.
You got back together with my client in May of 2015. Is that a rough assessment of when you guys got back together?
Did you
Yes.
answer out loud?
Yes.
And you'll agree with me that from maybe New Year's Eve or late 2013, that's when you broke up with my client, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so from
Before that.
before that?
Yeah, before New Year's Eve of 2013.
Right, late 2013, not on the last day.
No, no, no.
Okay. So, from 2014 to 2015, you guys were not together, correct? Until May of 2015. And it was your testimony that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no, no,
Is
it's
that
okay.
correct?
I just wanted to respond for her.
And then from July of 2014 until May of 2015, when you guys rekindled your relationship, my client was actively pursuing you to get back together. Is
Yes.
that correct? And you'll also agree with me that there was portions of your relationship with Mr. Adelson that continued after you got together with my client, correct?
Yes.
And when my client found out that you had been talking to Mr. Adelson, Charlie Adelson, not Harvey, Charlie Adelson, that he became very upset, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's indicative of one of the phone calls that was played for the jury, right?
Yes, sir.
And that phone call was 8 in the morning?
It was fairly early, yes.
Now, you're aware that, well, would this be safe to say that my client had multiple phones throughout the portion of your relationship with him?
Yes.
Would it also be fair to say that Luis Rivera had multiple phones?
Yes.
You'd always see Luis with at least 2 phones, correct?
Yes.
And did you know if Luis had one of his phones for his family and friends and the other ones for his drug dealing and robbing and all the other
I would-
illicit crimes that he was
I
committing?
would think that that's how it would happen. Yes.
The day before my client was arrested, the federal agents went to his work, correct?
Yes.
When he got home that night, did he pack his bags and attempt to flee?
No.
This trip that you guys had was a pre-planned vacation for your family?
Yes.
Had you packed up your furniture in the house
No.
to leave?
No.
Just like an overnight bag for the weekend with your children?
Yes. I've been making reservations like a couple of days before that, so
Before the agents came to talk to Mr. Garcia?
yes, sir.
You heard the government talk about certain vehicles that my client purchased after this incident?
Yes, sir.
Do you know how much Sigfredo paid for that Monte Carlo? No?
Basically nothing. Next to nothing.
Would you consider that to be an extravagant purchase?
No.
You were in court when Luis Rivera testified to how much money he would make off the off of these rips that he did, correct?
Yes, sir.
He said, between $10,000 and $20,000 per rip.
Yes.
So what he does during these rips, these robberies, is he targets drug dealers, right?
Yes, sir.
And he goes to a drug dealer's house, correct?
Yes, sir.
With a gun, probably.
Yes, sir.
And he goes in and he steals their money, right?
Yes, sir.
And their drugs, correct? And he was known to do this, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did Luis Rivera have a reputation in the community for being a violent person?
Yes.
Were people afraid of Luis Rivera?
Yes.
You've known Sigfredo over a decade?
Yes.
Talked to him a lot?
Yes, sir.
Did Sigfredo Garcia ever do anything to help Charlie Adelson?
Never.
I think we'll go ahead and take a lunch break now. I don't think the state's going to finish their cross in 20 minutes, so it'll just seem to do it all at once. So let's be back and ready to go at 1 o'clock, please. Either side need anything?
Yes, sir.
All right, there. All right, y'all have a good lunch. See you at 1 o'clock.